Following Jim's explanation on disasters, maybe to add something, Jim, is that most agencies are, when they talk disaster and say post-disaster, they talk about these camps, tents, tarpaulins as an emergency shelter as a method, and this transitional shelter, which is then will last, say, maybe 3 years, depending on whatever is agreed, till people can then transfer to permanent. But the agencies that work and their funding is mostly only up to this transitional shelter. So the whole thinking in the past is also not into permanent solutions, although you take it into account. It's not the objective, it's not where the people give the money for. It's also the accountability to the donors. That, you know, so that's why you saw, like with the tsunami in Aceh and Sri Lanka, initially funds were only had to be spent within 2 years. That was later extended till 3 years. Now, luckily, I mean, when all this money was collected in the Netherlands, from which Coordate get like 27%, it's 112 million euros to be divided over several agencies. We had learned from it, at least agencies have talked to donor agencies to make sure that it included also some reconstruction and it would be a longer time period. So this actually, the funds raised for Haiti is for a 5-year time period. So this afternoon, I think we are going to discuss a bit, you know, demands or research options or requests from the field, from Coordate team. So let me explain first what Coordate is. Coordate is the Catholic Organization for Relief and Development Aid. It, I think, exists as Coordate maybe 7-8 years before it was made Misa Menzino to a group of NGOs, and they came together and became Coordate. It's part of the Caritas network, the Catholic humanitarian organizations. There's about 140 all over the world. When you compare, like, the Red Cross is the biggest agency, NGO agency. Caritas network, the family of Caritas, compared to the family of the Red Crosses, is just below that in terms of, you know, the type of work and what they're doing, and, well, actually the turnover. If you look at the Coordate, I think their annual turnover is maybe 200 million euros, and for disasters, kind of emergency aid, it's about 10 million euros annually. Now, being an NGO and having this humanitarian, well, mission statements and all this, they target mostly the most vulnerable in society. And how is Coordate doing that? They mostly work with national NGOs, social NGOs, yeah, that they support in making change in their own society. Like for Haiti, you know, Coordate has been funding and capacity building for the last 20-30 years, mainly in respect of food security and protection, like violence against women and protecting the most vulnerable. Okay, that's now in the case of, say, when there's a big disaster and when there's either they don't have a good, say, local partner network in that country or in that area, they will set up, or they will establish their own office, you know, because there's a lot of money coming in, all those things, and it has also to do with the strength and the capacity of those NGOs, especially in terms of accountability, yeah, because there's a high demand. I mean, we get annual, twice a year we get audits, and the accountability and the reporting is very important. In that case, they set up their own office, which was the case in Aceh, because in Aceh, being a Sharia law environment, the Catholic network was not so strong there, and there was a lot of money at the same time. In the case of Haiti, also Coordate decided, when it became known that there was substantial money coming in, to set up to establish their own office. Part because their NGOs are mainly in rural areas, in food security in different areas. Plus, most of the NGOs working, say, from or in the urban areas were themselves affected by the earthquake. Their offices collapsed, their computers, people lost their homes, so they became actually also, yeah, victims of the earthquake. And directly after the earthquake, Corec supported this in tents and support to these affected NGOs that they could, as quick as possible, get back on their feet and continue their work actually in the areas they were before. And there was support in water and health. Now, the question that came from Alexander for today's presentation was to give a bit more background to why we are working in which area, why did we choose those areas to work in Haiti. I came there like 10 days after the earthquake, the 22nd of January, and there was no electricity in town, etc. There is, well, maybe you get to explain it at a different time, Jim, the whole cluster approach and the organization, but in short, the UN kind of immediately after the disaster, UNOCHA sets up what is called a cluster system, where, say, health, education, water, shelter is coordinated, this coordination body between the different agencies wanting to do something in that respective sector. And one of the first things what you want to know, of course, is the damage assessment. So satellite images, UNOPS, United Nations organization again, UNOPS, with satellite images counted the collapsed houses and extrapolated it, did some field visits. So within a few weeks we had already an indication of where's the major areas of damage affected. And through the cluster groups, so there were over 100 NGOs active in actually the emergency shelter and wanted to do more also in transitional shelter. So there's a lot of information came back from the field the first weeks. And so that was a basis to see which areas are affected. Then I looked at, in that affected area, which agencies, partner organizations, food coordinators were active already. I mean, it doesn't have to be in shelter or etc., but at least so you had an entry point in that community. And another, at least for the initial selection, was also that it should be a low-risk area in terms of starting a shelter program, especially already starting this transitional shelter and looking at the future. Low risk in the sense, like you saw the picture from Jim, the urban area, especially in the beginning, very complex, with the rubble, with government policies, wanting to build a whole new Port-au-Prince somewhere else, and this and that, and everybody was kind of not very clear where they were going. At the same time, there was an enormous demand, actually, from board aid, but also towards the donors, people who gave their money, 25 euros to 100 euros, to see results from what they do with the money, what's done with the money. So there's also always a kind of time interest when you start a program. And then I went to about eight different areas, and also checked in the cluster if there were no other major agencies already planning to work in that area. So in February 2010, Correct already selected 2 areas to try and start as quick as possible. That was in the commune you can say is a district of Grand Goave. In the commune you have also a capital, say district capital, it's the same name, say the Leogan, the town of Leogan you have, but the commune is actually the district of Leogan. That were the 2, say, rural areas that were selected. They were about 50 kilometers from the town of to the west. I'll show you later, but it's on this, in this area. This is Port-au-Prince, it's on this section. And another area, out of the 4 areas I visited in the Port-au-Prince and Carrefour area, in principle, Villa Rosa was chosen. That was very much similar, you see pictures later, as Jim showed you. A very complex one, but one of the partners had been working there, or it had been funding in the past slum improvement or rehabilitation projects there in improving the drainage systems, the footpaths, etc. So that would be like a stepping stone for that area. But we let it go because in the beginning, not as the first period to start, because of the complexity, but also for GRET to get on their feet themselves. They lost their own office actually. Then in April, May, it became known when, through the cluster, it was dense, we had better information on the damages. We also had information who is working in which area, who is doing what where, and And then it was noticed that there were a number of areas that was completely left out, or very few agencies. Well, the damage was considerable. And that was actually the basis of including 3 more urban or urbanized areas. The Grand Guave city, that was actually completely forgotten by all the NGOs. Till Gordon said, okay, then we do the whole city. We put all our money there, and then other agencies stepped in, and now I think we do 4 sections of that city, at least trying to replan and restructure. And 2 areas in Carrefour, that is actually next to the, well, actually jointly decided with care which areas, and we are actually neighboring each other and supporting each other in the field work. So it's Carrefour, Tissous, and Nantes-Porto. This is the map where you see, I might have to find the pointer. So you have here Port-au-Prince, the urban area of, say, the greater Port-au-Prince, because when people talk about Port-au-Prince, Port-au-Prince got about 1 million people, I think, inhabitants, but it's actually different cities built together. So the greater Port-au-Prince area, or the urbanized area, includes Carrefour, which is here. This is all urbanized areas. Pétionville, that's why you can look on this map. If you see that here is Carrefour on this map, here is Port-au-Prince noted, here is Pétionville, but this whole area to the airport is one urbanized area. You can have a look at it at Google Earth to get a better picture. Now the areas first selected is Grand Guave. Initially it was only half of this was selected. And later on, I'll explain later why it was extended. And this is the rural area in Leogan. This is Leogan city. It's in this area. And this is the rural area. And then, in Port-au-Prince, you will see later maps where this Villa Rosa is. And in Carrefour, there's one area close to the sea, which is like a flat area, and there's one area going into the hills. That was completely forgotten, those 2 areas, and this is the Grand city. Now for those areas, indication of the number of families in those areas. So that rural area in Leogan's got about 1,200 families. In Grand Guave, we estimate 2,300, because nobody has the statistics, there's no demographic data available. So this is based on samples we made and then extrapolated, and whatever information we could get. And this is those 4 sections, those 4 areas in Grand Guave City, 1,300. So we talk here about just below 5,000 families, 20,000, 25,000 people in those 3 areas. The idea is, I mean, just for this is just the proposal that we will build in those rural areas and Grand Guave City, 2,300 transitional shelters. I think Yip will talk more about the T-shelters, which are actually not T-shelters, but the first phase of the T-shelter. And we are also repairing 2 houses, because apart from houses being completely collapsed, there are also houses that are repairable. So there's also a plan and a budget to address that. And then it also includes latrines, and latrines actually maybe for more than the number of houses, depending on the situation. And these are the what we can call the urban area of Port-au-Prince, greater Port-au-Prince, that includes Carrefour. We have about between 8,500 and 9,000 families there. And we plan to construct maybe 3,000 shelters and about 1,000 repairs. But that still can fluctuate depending on the data we are collecting from the field. This is Grand Guave rural. Now the problem, you saw it already on the map, it's a vast area. It's about, probably more than 35 square kilometers. And it comprises small villages and hamlets, so it's very dispersed area. So it's also logistically, it's quite difficult. Some areas you can only reach by foot, especially when you go into the mountains. It's close to the sea, as you can see there. The NGO who was there, they were actually doing aquaculture in that bay for livelihood support and food security. We had problems there, social tensions between those communities, especially, and it's actually in relation also partly to other NGOs, because in the beginning, everybody is there's all these NGOs and they're all flag posting a bit. This is my territory, this is mine, etc. And they say they're going to build this area. And that's why we had in the beginning was only half the area, because we knew we could manage them. Then that NGO couldn't find the money to build shelters or to do these things. They left. And so when the